Yeah, the title's right. I turned down 5 player development interviews. I did. I was in the role for 6 years. I was at the University of Houston, University of Kansas, and Baylor University. I had a transition in between there, and I had 5 different opportunities to get into the role, and I turned and declined each one of them. Now, this video is not a flex video. I actually wrote a newsletter about this that actually took off, which is crazy. And so that newsletter you can find here. But I want to talk to you about the situations, what I learned, what you can learn. And I always get this question: what will get me back into player development? Hello, hello, hello. My name is Ed Jones II. I'm the founder of Beyond the Field Player Development. And as you heard in the intro, I was in the player development role at 3 universities. And what I do now is I help people create plans to impact the lives of athletes through programming, this podcast, and things like that. All right, sorry, you may hear some AC, the AC unit going. I'm in a different room. Things are being remodeled. And so, yeah. So let's talk about it. All right, so I came out. Let me get to the start of this. So in 2021, I was enrolled at Baylor University. I was in player development. I was assistant athletic director for player development there. Unfortunately, they removed the position. I was let go within a year. So I was at this kind of, I don't know, where would be precipice, or this moment where I was like, what do I do? What do I do in regards to my next step? And so for me, what happened was I was sitting in Waco, and unfortunately, what happened to me, there were some people there at the previous university in Waco that were spreading lies about me. And so I went with 9 months without hearing anything. I was applying for positions that my resume literally matched the position, or there were teams that literally reached out to me while I was at Baylor that were trying to bring me in. And now I'm like, hey, I'm a free agent, but they wouldn't touch me because of what people said. Hey, it's neither here or there. You reap what you sow. And so, hey, I'm going to keep it all positive there for me. People deal with things how they want to. But so I'm like, I don't want to live in Waco because the only reason I'm there is for this position. And so sorry for all the background noises. I'm in the back room with this water heater and all that. So I'm in Waco, and at this point, we got to make a decision. Do we move back to Houston, my hometown, or move to Kansas City, my wife's hometown? No. So we made a decision to move to Kansas City, a little more support for our young family. So we moved here. We just had our youngest child, and we're moving. We just purchased a home. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to sow my roots here, and we're going to figure it out. Maybe I'm going to be out of player development for a little while. It is what it is. I'm going to take care of my family first, because in the role, the way I was treated at the previous university, Baylor, my family was not a priority of anyone else. And so they had to be my priority. So we moved here. I'm getting in here, and I get a call from someone who I admire, who's been an OG in the game. And he's like, hey, you should apply for the NFL Academy position. Now, the NFL Academy, for you all that do not know, think of IMG Academy. They basically go around the world, and they get players to prepare, for lack of a better word, for NFL, not NFL opportunities, but collegiate football opportunities, and eventually NFL. So it's like a training ground there. So it's in really outside of London, I think Loughborough. I'm probably going to pronounce that wrong, university. And I'm like, oh my God. And I get it, and I'm like, and someone's like, man, you'd be perfect. You just go through the interview. Like, I'm like, we just moved here. And I couldn't go in and tell my wife, hey, we just got here. Let's move to another country. And so that was an opportunity that was, I was like, man, why didn't y'all call me 6 months ago, 8 months ago, a year ago? And unfortunately, I had to decline that interview because it just wasn't a fit for me and my family. Once again, I'm in a state now where priority is my family. So that first interview would have been a great opportunity with the NFL Academy, but had to take care of home first. Now, the second call I got was probably about a month later. I get it's a second opportunity, second call. I get a call from a Big Ten university, really well-established Big Ten university, has done incredible things on and off the field for their players, great pipeline, and it just wasn't the fit. It was a great, like I said, great opportunity. It just wasn't a fit. There were certain things there that I knew would be challenges, not because of, the culture or whatever it may be, but because of expectation and honestly how they did a certain thing very, very well. And I knew it would be a little different for me because they did a great job with former players being in that role, helping other players. And so it was kind of like, I thought about it like, okay, I'm not one of their alumni, and they've done a great job with alumni in the role, helping current players and former players. And so it wasn't a good fit. I felt like I could come against some challenges, not because anybody was rude, malicious, or anything like that, but you got to understand a certain way, and that university has a certain way. And I just, at this time in my life, felt like that it was the best decision for me to decline because of the fit. So yeah, that wasn't a fit that was gonna work out for me. The third opportunity came about a year after we moved here in Kansas City. It's from an SEC program, and the director reached out to me. I had been trying to reach out to them and try and help them because I saw them in the role. They had a staff of people, and a lot of them were new to player development, and I was trying to do some stuff that, hey, I can help you all, I can consult. Someone else was like, hey, you probably need to reach out to them. So I've been trying to reach out. In some kind of way we got connected. I think it might have been through some email I sent or a post I had. We got connected, and the director was transitioning. He was transitioning to another career field, and he was like, hey, man, I've heard a lot of great things about you. A lot of people know you. Would you be interested? He's like, hey, man, just come check us out. Come check us out. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go check them out. And it was kind of two-part for me, because one thing I do is I evaluate programs, and I say, hey, this is what I see from a player development aspect where you can get better, where you do great, But anyway, evaluating the good and the bad. And so I was like, you know what? I could evaluate and check out, if this would be a possibility. So I go to the university. I evaluate it. I'm looking at it. I'm like, okay, there's some strengths. There's some things here that would change, some opportunities for success. And I'm kind of, when I leave, I think to myself, you know what? This probably ain't for me. What they had a program that was set that came from another university. And to me, there was no chance to create in that program structure. That structure was, hey, this is how we did it at the last place. Do it exactly like this. And I am a creative person. It's one of my traits, work traits, and just personal traits. I'm creative. And I feel like, yeah, even in the structure, you have to adjust for what is needed at the time. So even in Beyond the Field, when I consult with people, I don't tell people, this is what I did at Houston, do this. There are markers, there are foundational things, but you have to adjust for what is needed for that team at the time. Once again, I was at 3 universities, and every university was different. Every year was different in each university. And so you could say, in a sense, I had 6 different player development programs in the 6 years I was in the role. And so it was highly supported. It had resources that it needed, but that structure, I would have been a peg into a system that I don't necessarily feel that I could expand and be my best self as a professional in. And so this was one where the director kept calling. I was like, man, just get in front of my head coach. Just do this. And I was like, you know what? There could be some benefit for me getting in front of head coach. Maybe the head coach, I could say, hey, I could consult. But I knew they were locked in on a certain way of doing player development. And that just, for me, was a little tough. So once again, there's another structure fit that just didn't work out. So I had to politely decline the opportunity. All right, the fourth opportunity, I'll put up 2 4s, not 8, but the fourth opportunity was from a Big Ten university. I got a call, kind of shocked me. I was at an event. One of my daughter's friends had a recital, so we were there supporting. We're at the event, and I got a call in the parking lot, and someone said, hey, so-and-so is going to give you a call. And I was like, I don't know so-and-so. Like, I know of them, and they've done a great job, and that coach was he won a lot wherever he's been. And so I talked to their GM. The GM talked to me about the player development position, what they needed, what they were looking for, how much the salary was, the opportunities for gain and different things like that. So I had a lot of questions. Big thing for me, the question for me is support. What is the support like for the head coach? And does the head coach know what they want to do? So I did a 5-minute Friday right here when I talk about the 2 things you need to know about a coach when you work for someone you don't know. And so from my experience at certain places, and really in my entire career, is I need to know if that coach truly supports. And so we had a good conversation, about a 30-minute conversation in the parking lot. I heard some things where like, oh, we could do this, we could do that. And once again, if I'm going to move my family, there has to be some certainties. And so I thought about it, went to the recital, and I was like, yeah, you know what? It's not a fit once again. I think a great opportunity. They want somebody in the role but off the responsibilities they had in the role, it didn't align with my definition of player development, which is the enhancement of the athlete experience through holistic and intentional programming and initiatives. It didn't align, and so had to make that decision. But what I did do is I recommended someone else, and that person did get an interview. They were a finalist, but they decided to go with a former player. But I bring that up because a lot of you all watching this, you all like to do vertical, and I did too. You all like to do vertical networking. So that means I want to get to a coach, I want to get to GM, I want to get to an AD, I want to get to the president. But there's a lot of gain in horizontal networking. So if I'm a GA, let me get to know other GAs. If I'm a coordinator, let me get to know other coordinators. If I'm a director, let me get to know other directors, because situations like this happen where, everyone that I declined, they asked for someone else. And I was like, hey, I got a list of people, right? And so the more you get to know people that are on the same trajectory, maybe a step ahead, a step behind you, those people may be your key to getting your next job. But going back to that, I had to decline that interview because once again, it wasn't a fit. Great opportunity. That coach actually transitioned to the SEC. So there was opportunity to, once again, I'd have moved and then moved again, and so, you got to know what you want to do, and that fit just wasn't there for me. All right, the fifth opportunity. Now, this one's a longer story. I have to tell you the entire background. So this was I'll start off here. So I knew some people in the NFL. After I got let go at Baylor, one of the scouts, and shout out to Chris Hall from the Dallas Cowboys, he really, really put me on game. And a lot of scouts like, hey, Jones, you need to come. I was texting them, letting them know, hey, I'm no longer at Baylor. If you need any help, if you need any, have any questions about the players, please reach out. And a lot of scouts were like, hey, Jones, you need to get to the combine. So as I'm getting to the combine, I'm talking to one of the guys I know, and he's telling me that he's talking to this specific coach in the SEC that he worked for. And he was like, hey, man, I'm telling this guy, don't believe what's coming out of Waco about you. Don't believe it. Don't believe it. Ed's a good guy. Ed can get it done. And so I'm like, you know what? At this point, I can't. If people want to lie on me, that's between them and God. That's just my belief. You got to, as I said earlier, you reap what you sow, and you're going to have to answer for the actions that you have in your life. And so I kind of was like, man, it is what it is, So I get to the combine, and one of the people I know in this space for NFL team says, hey, that same university, he's like, hey, they're going to give you a call. Somebody reached out, and I gave them your name. And I looked him in his face, and I said, they're not going to call me. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, they're not going to call me. Someone on the staff he worked for, the NFL team he worked for, had already reached out. I said, man, they're lying about me, and they're not going to call. And so he was like, man, they're going to call, let me know. So I knew that they weren't going to call. I had already walked through 8-9 months of people not reaching out to me because of lies that were said. Now, this is crazy. This is how I found out about the lies that were happening. I was at a university. I was interviewing with a head football coach who knew me from working at a rival university in the same city earlier in my career. And I'm sitting down with him, and the first thing he says is, Ed, I'm hearing stuff out of Waco that is not you. He said, I'm hearing that you're selfish, and if you start something, you don't finish. And I remember sitting in the interview and getting like emotional because I got caught off guard, right? And this is what my dad raised me on. My dad raised me on, rest in peace, Dad, love you. My dad raised me on, be who you say you're going to be and get things done that you said you're going to get done. And always take care of people first. And so it just caught me off guard. But I was like, man, that's crazy. They're really, lying on me about that, which is interesting. They said I'm about myself because, as some of you all know, Baylor University is a faith-based university. And when we had our all-staff devotional for the first time, guess who was the person leading the devotion? This selfish guy right here. But anyway, so I had already known that those lies were out there. Those rumors were out there. So the guy says, man, they're going to call you. I'm like, they're not going to call. And so what happens is they don't call. He calls me in 2 weeks. He says, hey, this university didn't call, blah, 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 blah. So I'm like, yeah, you know what? I knew this was going to happen. It is what it is. That's just the path that it is. That's part of the path right now, part of the journey. So fast forward 6 months. This university is in fall camp, or 4 months. 6 months. This university is in fall camp, and they need somebody. And I get a call. I get an email, and I get a call from someone. Hey, man, we heard things about you. We would love for you to interview for our director of player development position. Now, granted, this is the same university that believed lies about me for over a year. And so I politely declined. What I wanted to do, my flesh, what I wanted to do was say, hey, y'all whack. Y'all believe them lies and now you're coming back for your boy. But I just declined it because that's not how I was raised. That's not how I do things. That's not how I believe you should do things. But I ain't gonna lie, that petty meter was getting up there. But I said, hey, I appreciate it. At this time, I'm gonna decline. You all get in fall camp. Best of luck to you all. And so that was a funny story to me because it's like, man, y'all believed all that when you could have just brought me in and asked me. And they hired somebody who wasn't going to be in the role for long. And I know that too. One thing I know about player development, I know who's going to get in a role and who's going to get out pretty quick. And so if you're watching, it's like, man, help us out. I got people for you for the role. But those are the 5 opportunities I had that I declined. I learned a lot through that process. And so now let's talk about what I learned. The number one thing I learned, and if I could go back to those situations, what I would do differently, maybe not in terms of my decision, but in the terms of my action, is I would have went through the interview process with at least 4 of those universities, at least 4. Because one, I knew the people and I didn't want to like run game on them, whatever. I didn't want my name to continue to get marred, right? For reasons I can't control. But I would have went through the interviews because I would have had opportunity to meet with the people and hear what they're saying. Maybe this person who's calling me doesn't know what is being said. And so I would have been able to, the NFL Academy, I'd have been able to meet with them, talk to whoever I need to talk to, hear more stuff and say, hey, man, how can I support, right? I would have been able to listen to that Big Ten school, able to listen to that SEC school, that Big Ten school, that SEC school, to listen to these coaches and get conversation with the coaches. Because there's 2 things that could happen. Once again, I am in a role where I'm consulting. I can say, hey, you know what? How about this? I see what you have. I see what you're missing. I'm good. I can consult for you because you most likely want to hire a former player. So go get a former player. I will consult that former player for you. And if you're listening to this, you're an athletic director, you're a head coach, and that's what you want to do. You want to go hire one of your former players, hire them, and then hire me to consult. We will work together and we will flesh out what you want to see. So I would have heard that. But then also what I would have heard, which would have helped me in my role right now consulting, is what are the pain points for all these places? What's going on in today's programs with today's athletes, with today's coaches, with today's administrators? And so that would have helped me on this end. And then the other part is, in hindsight, now that I knew that people were lying on me or rumors out there, I would have had opportunity. They would have been able to hear from the horse's mouth, right? As people say, they've been able to listen to me talk and say, I don't know about what they're saying about this guy. I think that's kind of, you can't be this selfish and do certain things. Like there's, you judge a tree by its fruit. He's got different fruit than what I'm saying. They're saying that he's a pear tree, but he's actually an apple tree, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, some of y'all get that, whatever it may be. So that's what I learned. I would have dove deeper to, number one, the direct communication with the staff or whoever, helping my network grow. Number 2, understanding the pain points. And number 3, providing that opportunity for programs to know that, hey, if you need consulting, I am the guy to help you. So you may say, hey, that's pretty cool. Thank you for sharing that about you. But what's in it for me? I want to get something from that. So here are 4 things you can learn from the 5 interviews that I declined. All right. Number 1, continue to do the work. Continue to do the work. You never know who's watching, but I can assure you someone is watching. And so you want to continue to do the work. You want to continue to be great at what you want to do. You want to continue to provide value to your organization, to the athletes, to your staff, to the community, to the campus. You never, ever know who's watching. One of the stories I love is Alexander Martin, and you can listen to this podcast right here, who's with the Miami Dolphins now. He was serving with the University of Miami Athletics, and he got an opportunity from the Dolphins because they saw what he was doing, not only on the camp in athletics, but on the campus, but in the city. And so they said, hey, we see what you're doing in Miami. Would you want to come on and, would you interview for this position? And it flipped like that. They knew they wanted him. They knew what impact he could have, the value he could create. So that opportunity for him came about because he was doing the work. And so you may be sitting there like, man, when's my next time calling? When's my next time coming? Continue to do the work. I got all of those requests because someone knew the work I was doing, right? If you look at my career, when I went from the University of Houston to Kansas to Baylor, it was because I did the work. I was doing work at the high school level. The University of Houston knew. The head coach knew directly. He hired me. I was doing the work at University of Houston, when KU called, they actually wanted to hire somebody else on staff, going back to the horizontal networking. And that person on staff said, hey, I'm not the person for you, but Ed Jones is doing great work. He needs to be your guy. Boom, I get to University of Kansas. I get to University of Kansas, I'm doing the work. I get to Baylor because when I was at the University of Houston, boom, so let's bounce back. Because when I was at the University of Houston, I was doing a great job with alumni engagement, engaging our alumni, former players. One of our former players was a coach, was a position coach at Kansas, and he came to Houston, and they were in a transition after they got let go, because then I came on the next staff, but I was helping them out. Hey man, here's people you need to connect with. Hey man, come through, man. Make sure you come out, man. Come see us. Boom, boom, boom. So when he got a job at Baylor, after he got a job at Houston, which is crazy, we switched at Kansas, Houston. Anyway, he got a job at Baylor. They were looking for a director of player development. He said, man, I know this guy Jones, who I went to school with, who worked at Houston, and I was able to understand what he did in the role because he served me when he was at Houston. And boom, I got the position at Baylor. So continue to do the work. You never, ever know who's watching, but I can assure you someone is watching. And a lot of the people who are watching are right under your nose. You think it's people looking from that university or that professional team or that league or whatever it may be, wherever you want to be. And it's the people you work with, because the people you work with, the people you know, the people you serve and are serving have the connections that will get you to your next level. So be great, be where your feet are, because someone is always watching. The second thing you can learn from me and my situation, or what I share today, is go through the interview process. Go through the interview process. I talked about that. One thing I learned is, if I go back, I would have went through the interview process, because you don't know what you don't know until you know what you don't know, or you don't know what you don't know until you know what you don't know, or know what you know. Y'all get what I'm saying? Basically, whatever you think could be, you won't know until you go through the process. And so go through the full interview process. And I say this because you may think it's a job. You may be, oh, this is going to be awesome. You go through the interview process like, hey, this might be a little different. You know, once again, I made the decisions off two big things. And y'all, some of you all wrote notes and you know it. It's the 2 F's, family and fit. OK, I made decisions on that. Right. What was the best decision for my family at the time, and what was the best fit for me professionally at the time? And so you want to go through the entire interview process, because maybe, just maybe, one of those interviews, I would have been like, you know what, that's actually really good for my family and a great fit for me professionally. So go through the entire interview process. And some of you all may not have a family right now, and so it may just be fit. But you want to think about everything, because you may go to a place where you may not have a family now, and you may get a family while you're there. So think about everything. But anyway, all that to say, go through the entire interview process. The third thing is, interviewing is a form of networking and welcoming people into your career ecosystem, into your personal brand, into the way you do things. Through interviewing, right? It's networking. You're going to meet with these 5 people in the introductory deal. They see your resume, but now they get to know you. Like, wow, he had great energy. Or wow, she was really on it. Or wow, that was incredible what they shared, you know? And so you have an opportunity to go in there and say, hey, this is who I am. You know, this is how I do things. This is the why. Because people want to know. You never know who in that panel, or that person who's going to be the next head coach, the next athletic director, or have the next connection. Going back to what I said, the next connection you need. So when you get opportunity to go in there and crush it, absolutely crush it through the interview, it's opening up your network to a lot of people. I've been on interviews in situations where people who are connecting me on LinkedIn get to know me personally. A lot of people, once again, people are watching. A lot of people get a chance to fully get to experience who you are, and just your professionalism, how you do things, your mind, your communication, the impact you have. In interviews, you can leave people leaving with energy to where you may have a split room. 3 people may say, hey, I want to hire. I say yes. 2 people may say no, but those 3 people, whoever, or if it's 2, 3, whatever, you got somebody, you're going to leave with some champions who may meet you at a conference, which can be the Player Development Summit. Hey, May 29th through the 31st, in Kansas City. You may meet someone at an event and they may say, hey, you did a great job, and I just want to let you know you're on my top of the list if something happens. So The interview process is another form of networking and keeping inviting people into your career ecosystem. Number 4, be strong in your convictions about what you will and will not accept in a role. So for me, I don't have any regrets, right? I don't have any regrets in my full decision. I wish I would have done the interviews, but in my full decision, I don't say, man, I wish I would have took that position, or I wish I would have done that. Because I knew at the time I was in my life, and that's important. At the time I was in my life, I didn't want to move again. Okay. For me, I know I didn't want to move again, right? My oldest daughter, first time in her life, she's taken a birthday picture twice in the same location. And so when you I looked at all her birthday deals over the years, and every single one of them is in some different place, some different residence. And so right now where I'm at in my life, I do not want to just be moving and hopping and moving for the sake of saying that I have the position or I have the logo. That's not for me. And I am set in that, right? Wherever you are, you need to be set in what you will accept. There are some people that I talk to in player development like, man, you know what? This coach is on the hot seat. This coach might not make it a year. Well, you probably need, if you're entry level, you need to get in the role to get that director title. Okay. So you may know, hey, I'm gonna go in there 6 months, 8 months, crush it, get you rent a property, whatever, get you a short-term lease, and you know what's up. Maybe I'll win you there another year, but you got to know where you're at. But be strong in your yeses and your nos. You don't want to regret the decision. Now, it's actions. Yeah, we all can do actions. You can improve, but you don't want to regret the decision either way. You don't want to accept just to accept. Now, I know I just talked about those entry-level people. Sometimes if you truly want to get into it, there's some things you're going to have to give, but you don't want to accept just accept if you know it's not good personally for you as a person, as a professional, as a personal fit and a professional fit. But whatever it is, the yeses and the nos, you better make sure that your yeses are yeses and your nos are nos, and that you are good with it, because you're going to be the only person who has to deal with that. For me, I could have moved my family to these places. I knew these certain places, not necessarily that these places or these cities were miserable, but I knew for my wife and where we were that wasn't the best decision for our family. You know, me personally, the way I see things is faith and family, and then everything else goes underneath that. And so I just knew that taking care of my family is a cornerstone of the man I want to be. And so that's why I had to say no to those situations. Now, it is what it is for you. Just make sure that you're strong in whichever way you lean. Now, some of you all may say, man, do you ever want to get back into it? Like, it's funny. I had a webinar, and there's information about the player development webinars I host in the show notes. I had a webinar, and someone said, like, I got 3 questions in a row about why I'm not in a role. And it was kind of like, come on, y'all. But I understand it, because they're like, man, you're giving up so much game. You're giving us a lot of information. You're passionate about the space. Why are you not in a role? And so I had to break down why I'm not in a role. And so some of you all may be thinking that, and you know what? I'm going to share the 5 things reasons why I'm not in a role. I'm going to look at my notes because I'll start rambling. But anyway, so what would get me back into the role? The number one thing, and I talked about it earlier about, I have a video, 5 Minute Friday, about not knowing a coach that I work for or what you need to know. Number one, I have to know the head coach, or someone I trust, like that has the same values as me, has to know the head coach. Once in my career, I walked into a situation where nobody I knew the head coach. That didn't end well. And so I'm at a place, number one thing is whoever's leading that program, and I'm not saying we have to be aligned on everything. I just have to trust, number one, that this coach has a plan. Number two, that this coach has a plan for player development. And number 3, I can communicate with this coach and without this coach feeling a certain type of way. Insecurities. I'm not trying to deal with that, right? I want to know that there's a coach that has a plan for the program, has a plan for player development, and a coach that I can communicate with effectively. And I'm not saying you got to agree with everything I want to do, the coach's program, but we have to come to a consensus of, hey, we're going to agree to communicate and then agree to disagree if it comes there. But I have to trust that coach I work for. I will not blindly work for a coach that I do not know. And so that's number one thing. Number 2, I have to have a staff. That is a non-negotiable. All of these are non-negotiables, right? Earlier, I forgot to say that you need to know your non-negotiables. So number 1, I got to know the head coach. Someone I trust has to know. Number 2, I have to work with a staff. I did it for 6 years by myself. Shout out to Lauren Hawkins, who helped me in the student assistant role. But as far as full-time employees, I did it by myself for 6 years. And I am not doing that again. I am sorry. 120 players and one full-time employee to do all the player development, all the things that player development does and is and provides, ain't happening again. So that is the number 2 non-negotiable. Number 3, I have to have the opportunity to create an impactful program based on the needs of the program. This is important to me. I talked about this earlier. Not necessarily, hey, this is what we want to do in player development. Every single year, every single team, and now with the transfer portal, every single semester is different. What are the needs of the program? And let's create planning or programming for that. I don't want to get in around, put a round peg through a square hole. And that's including the programming I've done. I don't want to go in there and be like, hey, we did it this way. Okay, there's a structure. I have a structure for Beyond the Field. We're going to take care of personal wellness, community impact, and career development. Now, underneath that, we're going to figure out what the needs are inside of the program. So I have to have the opportunity to create there. Number 4, I have to have opportunity to continue to create content like this and continue to have the Player Development Summit, which is going to be when? May 29th through the 31st. Click the link in the show notes. Let's go. To create podcasts and interviews and do things to help the next generation of player development professionals and the current generation of player development professionals, those who are in the role and those who are interested, to get the resources that I didn't have in 2016 when I started in the role. I have to continue to do this, okay? And if there's a coach who says, hey, you can't do both, then it's not gonna work. Now, granted, with that said, I'm gonna respect the role. Once again, I can do this on my own time. No coach is going to control my time away from the building. I know how to balance creating content, creating things like that, having courses, helping people with doing a job. And so I have to be able to do this wherever I go. And then the 5th non-negotiable, they just got to come with a big bag. You feel me? Okay. I know the impact and the value I provide to programs and even to this entire player development space. So if someone's like, we need you on my staff, and y'all heard them 4 non-negotiables, the 5th one, you better come with a big bag, dog. I need a big bag. I'll get a money gun and shoot it. But a big bag not only for me, but for the staff I will work with. So you come with a big bag for the player development department. All right, so that is it. That is me diving deeper into the newsletter. Like I said, that newsletter link is in the show notes. I talked about the 5 podcasts that podcast. I talked about the 5 player development interviews that I declined. I talked about what I learned from that. I talked about what you can learn from that. And I talked about my 5 non-negotiables of getting back into player development. Hey, as always, go out and create generational impact. Check out these videos here that will help you. And once again, I've said it multiple times. You have seen it during this podcast. The Player Development Summit will be in May 2025. May 29th through the 31st, 2025, here in Kansas City. I want you to be a part of this. You need to be there. It's going to be incredible. Y'all, the experience is going to be elite. It's going to be epic. We're going to make this the best one ever. And I want to see you there. Go out and create generational impact. Don't wait. Create that generational impact when? Create it today. Have a good one.